The morning my granddaughter Clara said her stomach hurt, I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that her fever wasn't the reason she was really home that day. It was a Thursday in late spring, the kind of morning in the old house in Willow Creek where the sun poured into the kitchen and made the dust motes dance, usually promising that everything would be all right. I felt her forehead. It was barely warm, nothing serious at all. But when my eyes met hers, I saw a flicker of worry, a shadow of an unspoken fear that stopped me cold. That morning, I thought she just needed some rest. I never imagined she would save my life. "Grandma, my stomach hurts. Can I stay home today?" she'd asked, her voice small and tired. I looked at my girl, my beautiful Clara. She had been my whole world since her mother, my beloved daughter-in-law, passed away 2 years ago. I had invited my son, Robert, to bring Clara to live with me in this old house, the one that had been in our family for 3 generations. I offered stability and love, the 2 things I knew she desperately needed, and for years I thought I had done everything right. I brewed a strong cup of my own coffee first, the one that smelled like 40 years of mornings in that kitchen. Bitter, strong, and comforting, just the way I like it. I put a slice of buttered toast and a jar of my homemade blackberry jam on the table for Clara. We sat in the kitchen, bathed in that golden light, next to the window overlooking my little herb garden. The silence between us was usually a warm, easy quiet, the silence of 2 people who love each other and don't need to fill the space with words. But that morning, it felt heavy, a silence full of things unsaid. I'd lived my whole 67 years in this same place. Every crack in the old pine floor held a memory. I got married here. My son Robert was born here. I was left alone here when my husband abandoned us. Robert was only 3 years old then. I raised him by myself. I worked cleaning houses for 20 years to put him through school, to give him what I never had, to make him someone in life. And he was. He graduated, got a good job, married a good woman, and they had Clara. But 2 years ago, when his wife died in a traffic accident, everything changed. Robert asked me to take care of Clara while he worked. "Of course," I said. "This house has plenty of room." But since then, Robert started to change. He visited less, talked less, and looked at me differently. 3 months ago, he came with papers. "Mom, I need you to sign this," he told me, insisting it was for my protection. I read the papers, or tried to. The print was small, and my eyes aren't good anymore. But something inside me stopped me. A small instinctive voice that told me, "Wait, don't sign yet." And I didn't. He came back the next week, and the one after that, always with the same papers, always with the same insistence. "Mom, do it for Clara." But still, I didn't sign. This house is worth a lot now. The neighborhood became trendy. Fancy coffee shops opened on every corner. A month ago, a man knocked on my door and offered me $300,000 for the property. "No," I told him. "This house is not for sale. It never will be. My memories are here. My life is here." After breakfast that morning, Clara helped me wash the dishes. Then she went to the living room to watch television. I stayed in the kitchen, tidying up, putting the mugs back on the shelf, wiping the table, sweeping the floor. Everything in its place. That's how I like to live, with order, with calm. I was planning to make my chicken and rice soup for lunch. It was almost 11 when I decided to go upstairs and change out of my old lavender robe. My knees aren't strong anymore. Every step reminds me that I am 67 years old. I reached my room, changed into a simple blouse and pants. I looked in the mirror. I saw an older woman, but I also saw strength. I saw someone who survived. I didn't know that while I was upstairs, downstairs, Clara was hearing a sound that would change everything. The unmistakable sound of a key turning in the front door lock. Who else had a key to the house? Only her father. But he worked until 6. He never came home at this hour. Clara's heart began to beat faster. Something wasn't right. She quickly turned off the television and tiptoed into her bedroom, which was on the first floor right next to the living room. She left the door barely ajar, and then she saw him, Robert, dressed in his gray work suit, but walking differently, looking around as if he were doing something forbidden. Clara felt something cold run down her back. My son went straight to the coat rack where my old, thick green winter coat was hanging. He took something small, a little white baggie, out of his own pocket. He put it into the pocket of my coat. Clara didn't understand, but she knew it was bad. Very bad. Robert took out his phone. He dialed a number, waited, and then spoke in a low voice. "It's done," he murmured. "Tonight, you can call the police." "That old woman won't understand a thing. The police?" Clara felt the floor disappear beneath her feet. "Why would someone call the police?" Her hands were shaking. She covered her mouth to stop herself from screaming. Her own father. The man who was supposed to protect her. He was doing something unforgivable. "Yes," Robert continued on the phone. "The house will be free in 1 week, 2 maximum. No one will believe a 67-year-old woman with drugs in her pocket. Social services will take the kid and I'll have the house. $300,000, Lisa, divided between us two. $150,000 for each of us. Enough to start over." Drugs. Clara closed her eyes. Her father had put drugs in my coat. He was going to have me arrested, take my house, and destroy everything. And she, Clara, would be taken somewhere far away from the only person who truly loved her. "No," Robert said. "She doesn't suspect anything. She still won't sign the papers, but it doesn't matter anymore. When they arrest her for drug possession, she'll lose all her rights. A judge will give me the house automatically. It's perfect. Silence, then a laugh. A cold, empty laugh Clara had never heard before. "I'll see you tonight," Robert finished. "You make the anonymous call at 9 here. I'll be here at 9:30, right when the police arrive. I'll act surprised. The worried son. No one will suspect." He hung up, put the phone in his pocket, and smiled, a small, cruel smile. Then he left the house, closing the door softly behind him. Clara stayed in her room, shaking, crying silently. She didn't know how to process what she had just seen, her own father, the man who taught her how to ride a bike, who hugged her when she had nightmares. That man had just betrayed his own mother, the woman who sacrificed everything for him. She wiped her tears and took a deep breath. She had to think. She had to do something. She couldn't let this happen. Grandma was everything to her. After her mother died, I had given her love, security, a home. I taught her how to be strong. She couldn't lose me. She came out of her room carefully and went straight to the coat rack. Her hand trembled as she reached for the pocket. She put her fingers in and felt it, a small plastic baggie. She pulled it out. It was the size of her thumb, with white powder inside. Her father had put this here. Her father was going to destroy me. She hid the baggie in her own pocket. She had to think fast. She needed to protect me. If she told me, I might not believe her. Or worse, I would believe her but wouldn't know what to do. I was strong, but I still trusted people, especially my son. How could she tell me my good son was a betrayer? Upstairs, I finished getting dressed and walked down the stairs slowly. Clara was back on the sofa with the television on, as if nothing had happened. But I knew her well. I noticed something different. Red eyes, restless hands. "Are you okay, my love?" I asked. She nodded quickly. "Yes, Grandma. It's just the movie. It's sad. I wasn't convinced, but didn't push. I'm going to start lunch," I said. "Chicken and rice soup. Yes, Grandma." "I love your soup," she said, attempting a smile. I went to the kitchen, took out the big pot, and started chopping the vegetables. The knife against the wooden cutting board made a familiar, calming, rhythmic sound. But today, there was something strange in the air. I just felt that something wasn't right. I looked toward the living room. Clara was sitting very still, too still, staring intently at the television, but not really watching. In the living room, Clara was thinking so fast her head hurt. She needed a plan. She needed proof. Her word against her father's wouldn't be enough. No one would believe a 14-year-old girl. She needed something concrete. Her old phone. It had a camera, a voice recorder. If her father came tonight, she could record him. But that wasn't enough. She needed the call that the woman named Lisa would make at 9 tonight. The anonymous call reporting me. If she could record that too, they would have irrefutable proof. But how could she record a call that wouldn't even come to this house? Lisa would call the police directly. Robert had said he would come at 9:30, right when the police arrived. That meant the police would arrive around that time, so Lisa's call would be made shortly before, at 9 or a little after. Enough time for the police to receive the report and send a patrol car. Clara grabbed her phone and searched the internet. How to record calls, how to get proof, how to protect someone from a trap. She read article after article, and slowly a plan began to form in her mind. Lunch passed in a tense silence. I served the soup. Clara ate slowly, moving her spoon without enthusiasm. She barely tasted it. Are you sure you're okay, my love? I asked again. She looked up. Her brown eyes looked at me with a strange intensity. Yes, Grandma. I'm just tired, I nodded. It's okay. After lunch, you can go rest in your room. We finished eating. Clara offered to wash the dishes, something she never did without me asking. No, my love. I'll do them. Go rest. She hesitated, then went up to her room. I watched her walk away. My granddaughter was suffering from something, and it hurt me not to be able to help her. I washed the dishes in silence, my thoughts flying to dark places. Upstairs, Clara closed her bedroom door and sat on her bed. She took the little white baggie out of her pocket. It was so small, so insignificant, but it had the power to destroy everything, to take me away, to hand her father $300,000 stained with betrayal. She couldn't allow it. She wouldn't. She put the baggie in the deepest drawer of her dresser, underneath her winter clothes, where no one would look for it. Then she took out her phone. She only had a few hours before everything exploded. First, she wrote down every detail she remembered in her notes app. The name Lisa, the $300,000, the plan for the anonymous call, everything. Every small detail, because she knew she couldn't make a mistake. She needed real proof, audio, video, something tangible the police couldn't ignore. Robert wouldn't return until the police arrived. He would be the perfect worried son. He would act so well that she herself would almost believe him. Then the thought occurred to her. Lisa existed. Lisa would make the call. Robert had said, "I'll see you tonight." That meant Lisa would come here tonight. Clara felt a chill. Lisa would be here, and that meant an opportunity to confront her, to record her, to get her to admit the plan. But it was dangerous, very dangerous. She was only a child. Lisa was an adult willing to commit a crime. What would stop her from hurting a child too? But Clara had no choice. She couldn't go to the police yet. Her word meant nothing without evidence. She couldn't tell me. I might confront Robert, and he would deny everything and run away. No, she had to do this alone. She had to be brave. For me, for both of us, a mother's distrust is often a quiet warning. I couldn't know it then, but my instincts were trying to save me. Downstairs, I finished washing the dishes. I dried everything meticulously. I put everything in its place. Then I settled on the living room sofa, turning on the old black and white television. But I wasn't paying attention to the program. My mind was somewhere else, churning with the bitter thoughts of Robert. I was thinking about how he had changed, about how aggressively he insisted on those papers, about how he looked at me lately, as if I were an obsolete object, an inconvenient obstacle. It hurt me to think this way about my own son. The child I raised, the man who was supposed to love me forever. But something deep inside me was screaming a warning, a truth I didn't want to hear but could no longer ignore. I recalled the last time he came with the papers just 2 weeks ago. He walked in with a brown folder. "Mom, we have to talk," he'd said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. He opened the folder. "I need you to sign this today. It's urgent." "Why is it urgent?" I asked. "Because it is. Because I need to protect you," he replied, his voice laced with impatience. "Protect me from what?" He sighed, deeply frustrated. "Mom, you're 67 years old. You're not young anymore. If something happens to you, if you get sick, if you lose your mind, I need to be able to make decisions for you. For your own good. For Clara's good." I reread the papers, straining my eyes. They stated that I was giving him legal power over all my properties, over this house, over my bank accounts, over everything. They stipulated that he could make all medical, financial, and life decisions for me, and I would have no voice, no vote. I would be completely under his control. "I'm not signing this," I told him. "Why not?" "You don't trust me?" "The papers, Robert. I don't trust the papers." He stood up, his anger rising. "You're stubborn. A stubborn old woman who doesn't understand what's good for her." And he left, slamming the door. Since then, he hadn't been back. He hadn't called. He hadn't asked about Clara. Nothing. As if he had simply erased us from his life. I had spent the last 2 weeks agonizing, wondering if I had done the right thing, if my profound distrust was justified, or if it was just the paranoia of an old woman seeing ghosts where there were none. Now, sitting on my sofa, my instinct felt heavy and true. That small voice that stopped me from signing knew something my conscious mind refused to accept. The hours passed slowly. The afternoon turned into the deep, heavy twilight of evening. I turned on the lights in the house. Clara came down around 6. Are you hungry? I asked, a little. I made simple turkey and Swiss sandwiches. Nothing elaborate. We ate in front of the television, quiet again. Clara was still subdued, and so was I. Each of us lost in our own thoughts, each of us carrying secrets we weren't sharing. She knew what was coming. I only felt that something bad was approaching, like a storm gathering just beyond the horizon. At 7, Clara said she had homework. She went back up to her room. I was left alone in the living room. It started raining outside, soft, persistent drops against the windows. The sound had always seemed calming to me, a blanket of sound. But not tonight. Tonight the sound of the rain felt like a warning, an alert, as if the very sky knew something terrible was about to happen. Upstairs, Clara wasn't doing homework. She was getting ready. She checked her old phone. The battery was at 100%. Good. She tested the voice recorder. It worked perfectly. She tested the camera. It also worked. She put the phone on silent mode. She couldn't risk it ringing at the wrong moment. Then she dressed completely in black, black pants, black sweatshirt. If she had to hide, she needed to be invisible. It was 1 more hour. 1 hour before the plan, Robert's terrible plan, was set into motion. Clara sat on her bed. She was scared, very scared. But she was also filled with determination. No one would take away her grandma. No one would destroy our home, not even her own father, the one who should have been protecting them. At the moment, 8:30, the doorbell rang. I stood up from the sofa, surprised. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the window before opening. It was Robert. My son was standing in the downpour, without an umbrella. The water soaked his gray suit. "Robert," I said, opening the door. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, Mom. I need to talk to you." He walked in without waiting for an invitation, shaking the water from his hair. He left a trail of drops on the entryway floor. I looked at him, confused. "I thought you were mad at me because of the papers." He smiled, but it was a strange smile. "Let's forget that, Mom. I came to apologize." "You were right. I shouldn't have pressured you." Something in his voice didn't sound sincere. But he was my son, and a mother always wants to believe the best. "Ben, sit down. I'll make you coffee." "You're soaked," he shook his head. "No, Mom, I don't want coffee. I just want to talk." We sat in the living room. I turned down the volume on the television. Robert looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "How is Clara?" he asked. "Fine. Upstairs doing homework. Can I see her later?" "Let her concentrate." Upstairs, Clara had heard her father's voice. She peered down the stairs. He was sitting in the living room with me. It was too early. He was supposed to come at 9:30. Why had he arrived an hour early? Something didn't add up. Clara felt panic. The plan was changing, and she wasn't prepared. She grabbed her phone and crept down the stairs silently. She stayed hidden in the hallway, listening, ready to record. "Mom, I need to ask you for something," Robert said. "Anything, son. I need money." "Money for what?" "I have debts. Big debts. If I don't pay them soon, they're going to hurt me." I froze. "How much do you need?" $50,000. It was almost everything I had saved. The money I kept for emergencies, for my old age, to leave something for Clara when I died. "Robert, I don't have that much money available." "Yes, you do. I know. It's in your savings account. You can take it out tomorrow." "How do you know how much I have in my account?" He tensed up. "I just know." "Mom, please. I'm desperate. They are bad people. If I don't pay them, they'll hurt me. Maybe they'll hurt Clara, too." My heart raced. "Is Clara in danger?" "She could be. If I don't pay, but if you give me the money, everything will be resolved. Everything will go back to normal." I looked him in the eyes, searching for the truth, searching for my son. But what I saw scared me. There was something cold in his gaze, something calculating. "I can't give you that money, Robert. Not like this. Not without better understanding what's going on. Who are these people? Why do you owe them?" "That doesn't matter. Just give me the money." "No." He stood up from the armchair. His voice rose. "Are you telling me no? Information!" "Always with your questions. Always distrusting. I'm your son. Isn't that enough?" "Precisely because you are my son. If you're in trouble, I want to really help you. Not just by giving you money." Robert walked toward the window. He stood looking out at the rain, his back rigid. Clara, from the hallway, was recording everything with her phone. The audio wasn't perfect, but the conversation was audible. Her father was asking for money, lying about debts, pressuring me. It was another layer of his plan. If I gave in, perfect. If I didn't, plan B would be set in motion. The drugs, the police, the house. You know what, Mom? Robert said, turning around. Forget it. I don't want your money. I don't want anything from you. Son, please don't leave like this. He walked toward the door. There's nothing to talk about. You were always the same. Stingy, selfish. I gave you my life. I raised you alone. I sacrificed everything for you. And now you tell me I'm selfish because I won't give you $50,000 just like that? He opened the door. The rain poured down heavily. You're going to regret this, Mom, I promise you. He left. The door closed with a bang that echoed throughout the house. I stood in the entryway, shaking, not from the cold, but from fear. My son's words sounded like a promise of something terrible. Clara came out of the hallway. Grandma, are you okay? I turned around. She was pale. She had heard everything. Yes, my love. I'm fine. It was just an argument. I went back to the living room and sat down. My legs wouldn't support me. Clara sat down next to me and took my hand. It was small, warm, and comforting. Grandma, I have to tell you something. I looked at her. Her eyes were full of tears. What is it, my love? Dad came today when you were upstairs. I saw him. He put something in your coat, in the pocket, something bad. And he spoke on the phone. He said they're going to call the police tonight, that they're going to blame you, that they're going to take your house. I couldn't breathe. What? Clara started crying. I'm sorry, Grandma. I should have told you sooner. But I was afraid. Afraid you wouldn't believe me. I hugged my granddaughter. She was sobbing against my chest. I was trying to process the horrifying words. My son. My own son. He had sneaked into my house. He had planted something in my coat. He was going to have me arrested for a crime I didn't commit. Where is it? I asked in a broken voice. Where is what he put in my coat? I have it. I hid it in my room. Go get it now. Clara ran upstairs. I stood up and went to the coat rack. I checked the green coat. The pockets were empty. Clara came down with a small white baggie in her hand. She placed it on the coffee table. I looked at it without touching it. It was small, almost insignificant, but I knew what it was. Drugs. My son had put them here to destroy me. Tears began to stream down my cheeks. I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it, but it was true. My son had betrayed me in the worst way possible. What are we going to do, Grandma? Clara asked. Her voice was small and scared. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down and think clearly. I don't know, my love, but we have to act fast. If what you're saying is true, the police are going to come tonight. Clara nodded. Dad said a woman named Lisa would make the call at 9:05. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 8:45. We had 15 minutes. 15 minutes to decide what to do. 15 minutes to save our lives. Think, Edith, think. If the police came and found the drugs, they would arrest me. It wouldn't matter if I said they weren't mine. I would look guilty, and Robert would show up later, acting surprised, the concerned son. But if the drugs weren't here when the police arrived, his plan would fail. They needed to find the drugs for the plan to work. Without drugs, there was no crime. Without crime, there was no arrest. Without arrest, there was no way to take my house. We have to get rid of this, I said, pointing to the baggie. How? Clara asked. Can we flush them down the toilet? No, they might check the drains, everything. We have to get them out of the house completely. Clara thought for a moment. We can bury them in the garden. No one will see us in the rain. It was risky, but we had no choice. Okay, let's go. I grabbed the baggie with a kitchen towel. I didn't want to leave my fingerprints on it. We went out to the backyard. The rain was falling heavily. We were soaked in seconds. I dug a small hole near the tomato plants. I buried the baggie deep. Clara helped me tamp down the dirt. When we finished, our hands were covered in mud, but the drugs were no longer in the house. We came in and quickly cleaned up and changed our clothes. It was 8:55, 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, someone would call the police saying I had drugs, and the police would come and they wouldn't find anything. And then what? What would happen when Robert realized his plan had failed? The answer terrified me, but there was no turning back. We could only move forward. We could only fight. We sat in the living room waiting, Clara next to me. The clock struck 9 now. Somewhere in the city, a woman named Lisa was dialing the police number. She was saying that there were drugs at this address, that an old woman was keeping them, that it was urgent. I could imagine her voice, cold, calculating, lying easily, and the officers on the other end, taking notes, sending a patrol car, preparing to come and destroy my life. How long do you think they'll take? Clara asked. Her voice was trembling. I don't know, my love. 20 minutes, maybe 30, she nodded. Grandma, I'm scared. Me too. But we're going to be okay. We have to be strong. We have to trust that the truth will come out. Clara looked at me with those brown eyes, so much like mine. What if they don't believe us? What if they think we're lying? Then we'll keep fighting. I won't let them take what is mine. I won't let them take you away from me. Never. The minutes passed slowly. Every second felt like an hour. The rain continued to fall. I thought about Robert, about the baby I had held in my arms 35 years ago, about the boy who hugged me when he had nightmares. Where had that child been lost? At what moment did love turn into greed? I had spent my life building a man of honor, but sometimes a mother's effort simply can't compete with a child's choice. I had spent my life building a man of honor, but sometimes a mother's effort simply can't compete with a child's choice. I remembered small moments over the years that had seemed insignificant at the time, moments that now assembled themselves into a terrible mosaic of selfishness. When Robert was 10, he stole money from my wallet. He lied to me, swore he hadn't done it, but I found the bills hidden in his room. When he was 17, he wrecked my car. He lied then too, claiming someone else had hit it while it was parked. But a neighbor told me the truth. Robert had been racing with his friends. There were always lies. There was always selfishness. But I had always justified it. He's young. He'll mature. He'll change. He never changed. At 9:25, we heard sirens. Distant at first, then closer, closer, and closer, until they stopped right in front of my house. Red and blue lights illuminated the living room walls. Clara grabbed my arm. They're here. Yes, they're here. I took a deep breath. I stood up and smoothed out my blouse. I prepared for what was coming. The doorbell rang loudly, insistently. I opened the door. 2 police officers were standing in the rain. An older man in uniform and a younger woman next to him. Good evening, ma'am. I'm Officer Thomas. We received a call about suspicious activity at this address. Can we come inside? Of course, officer. Come in. They walked in, shaking off the water. They looked around. The house was tidy, clean as always. Do you live alone, ma'am? Officer Thomas asked. No, I live with my granddaughter. She's 14 years old. She's in the living room. Anyone else? No, just the 2 of us. The officer nodded. The woman officer took out a notepad. Ma'am, are you aware of any illegal substances in this house? No, of course not. I've never had anything like that. Would you be willing to let us search? Yes, search whatever you need. I have nothing to hide. The 2 officers looked at each other. They seemed surprised by my immediate cooperation. Perhaps they expected resistance or nervousness, but I was calm because I knew they wouldn't find anything. The drugs were buried in the garden, under the rain, where no one would look for them. They began to search the living room first. They lifted the sofa cushions. They looked under the furniture. Nothing. Then the kitchen. They opened cabinets. They checked the pantry, the refrigerator. Nothing. They went to the dining room, to the bathrooms, to the bedrooms. Everything meticulously, everything carefully. I followed them. Clara stayed in the living room, sitting quietly with her hands in her lap. Half an hour later, the officers came down the stairs. We didn't find anything, ma'am, Officer Thomas said. He looked confused. Maybe it was a false call, a bad joke, or someone got the wrong address. I looked him directly in the eyes. Officer, may I ask you something? Sure. Who made the call? I can't give you that information. It was anonymous. But someone said I had drugs here. Someone lied. Someone wants to harm me. Doesn't that seem strange to you? The officer sighed. Yes, it is strange. I'm going to report this. We will investigate who made the call. If someone is trying to frame you, we will take action. The officers left. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it. My legs were shaking. Clara ran to me. She hugged me. We did it, Grandma. They didn't find anything. Yes, my love. We did it, but this isn't over. When Robert finds out, he'll come back. He's going to be furious. He'll want to know what happened, and we have to be prepared. Clara nodded. I recorded the conversation from a while ago when he asked for the money. It's on my phone. Good. That might help us, but we need more. We need proof that he put the drugs here. As if I had summoned him with my words, we heard a key in the door. Clara and I looked at each other. It was him. Robert burst in, furious. His eyes first searched for the police officers, but they were gone. "It was just us. What happened?" he asked. His voice was a growl. "Where are they?" "They left," I said calmly. "They didn't find anything because there is nothing." He approached me. His face was red, his fists clenched. "That's impossible. I put them there myself." "They're in your coat, in the pocket of the green coat." The silence that followed was dense, heavy. Robert realized what he had said, what he had just admitted. He tried to backtrack. I thought someone told me—" "No, Robert," I interrupted. "You said it clearly. You put them there. You brought drugs into my house. You called the police or had someone call, all to take my house, to rob me." "Your own mother." He took a step back. "It's not like that. You're confusing things, crazy old woman. I'm not confused. And I'm not alone. Clara heard you this morning. She saw you come in. She saw you put the baggie in my coat. She heard you talk on the phone with Lisa." Robert looked at Clara. She looked back at him without fear, with disappointment, with sadness, but without fear. "You," he said. "You ruined everything. You're just a nosy kid." "I don't regret anything," Clara said in a firm voice. "I was protecting Grandma. Something you should have done." Robert laughed, a bitter laugh, full of venom. "Protect her? She doesn't need protection. She needs to disappear. She's old, useless. She's taking up a house worth $300,000. Money that should be mine. I'm her son. I deserve it. You don't deserve anything," I said. My hands were trembling, but my voice was firm. "I gave you everything. My youth, my energy, my money. I raised you alone. I sacrificed everything for you. And now you want to rob me. You want to destroy me. You are not my son. My son died a long time ago. You are just a stranger. A greedy, cruel stranger." Robert looked at me with pure hatred. "Fine, if that's what you want. I'll get that house anyway. There are other ways. I can have you declared incompetent. I can say you're sick, that you can't take care of yourself, much less a child. They'll take Clara away from you. They'll put you in a nursing home and I'll have what's mine." "Go ahead," I said. "Try it, but I'm warning you about something." Clara recorded everything. Your conversation this morning, your confession just now. Everything is on her phone. And if you try anything against us, that recording goes straight to the police." Robert turned pale. "You're lying," Clara raised her phone. On the screen, the counter of a recording in progress could be seen. She had been recording since he walked in. Every word, every admission, every threat, everything documented, everything saved. Irrefutable proof of his betrayal. "Get away from us," I commanded. "Don't ever come back. Don't call. Don't write. You don't exist to me. And if anything happens to Clara or me, that recording will reach the authorities automatically." Clara made sure of that. "So go, and don't come back." Robert looked at us, first at me, then at Clara, his own daughter. I saw the moment something broke in him, the moment he realized he had lost, that his plan had failed, that he wouldn't have the house or the money, not even the love of his family, because he had destroyed everything for greed. He turned around. He walked toward the door. Before leaving, he stopped. He didn't turn around. He just spoke. "You're going to regret this, both of you." He left. The door closed. The sound echoed in the empty house. Clara and I stood in the middle of the living room, shaking, crying, hugging each other. We had won this battle, but we knew the war might not be over. The terrible victory of that night was paid for with a mother's sleepless fear. We knew the fight was not yet over. The terrible victory of that night was paid for with a mother's sleepless fear. We knew the fight was not yet over. That night we didn't sleep at all. Clara and I stayed awake in the living room with all the lights blazing. Every unfamiliar sound startled us. Every drop of rain against the window, every creak of the old house. We were terrified Robert would come back, afraid he would bring someone with him, afraid his last threat, "You're going to regret this," wasn't just words. I sat on the sofa with a cup of tea that grew cold in my hands. I couldn't drink it. Clara was curled up next to me, her phone clutched tight, checking the recording again and again, making absolutely sure it was complete, that everything was heard clearly, that it would be enough to protect us. "Grandma, we should go to the police first thing tomorrow morning," she said, her voice strained. "Take the recording. Tell them everything." "You're right, my love, but we have to be careful," I replied. "Your father knows people. He has contacts. If we go to the wrong officer, he could get away with it. We need to go straight to the central station, file a formal report, make sure everything is recorded and documented. Clara put away her phone, but not before she made 3 backup copies of the recording, one in the cloud, another in my email, and a third on a small USB drive she found on her desk. We couldn't risk losing the only proof we had. While we waited for dawn, I thought about the whole horrifying trajectory of my life. This morning, I had woken up believing my biggest problem was Clara feeling sick. Now I knew that my own son had tried to destroy me, willing to see me arrested, to take everything away from me, to separate me from my granddaughter, all for money, for a house, for pure, cold greed. My chest ached, a physical pain, as if someone had ripped out my heart, because in a way, they had. My son had ripped out my heart. I remembered the day he was born. It was a difficult delivery, 30 hours of pain. But when I finally held him in my arms, he was perfect. I looked at him and thought, I'm going to give you everything. I'm going to love you with every fiber of my being. I'm going to protect you from the world. And I did. For 35 years I did. I worked 2 jobs. I cleaned houses until my hands bled. I skipped meals so he could eat. I went without heat in the winter to pay for his school. I gave everything. Absolutely everything. And he paid me back with betrayal. Where did I go wrong? I asked out loud. Clara looked at me. You didn't go wrong, Grandma. He went wrong. You gave him love. You gave him opportunities. But some people simply choose to be bad. It's not your fault. I wanted to believe her. But the doubt gnawed at me. Maybe I spoiled him. Maybe I gave him too much or too little. Maybe if his father hadn't abandoned us, everything would be different. Maybe Robert needed a father figure, someone to teach him how to be a real man, a man with honor, with values, with respect. But there was no point dwelling on the maybes, on what could have been. The reality was this. My son had betrayed me, and I had to protect myself. Protect Clara. Make sure he couldn't harm us anymore. The sky began to lighten around 6 in the morning. The rain had stopped. Birds began to sing outside. A new day, a day we would face together. We got up, we showered. We dressed in clean clothes. I made strong coffee and toast, a simple but necessary breakfast. We needed strength for what was coming. At 7:30, we left the house. We took a taxi to the Central Police Station. It was a large, gray concrete building, cold, intimidating, but we walked in with our heads held high. We approached the counter. A young officer was sitting behind a desk full of papers. Good morning. How can I help you? I need to file a complaint, I said, my voice steady, against my son for attempted fraud, for conspiracy, for trying to frame me with drugs that he himself planted in my house. The officer looked up and scrutinized us. When did this happen? Yesterday. And we have proof, audio recordings, witnesses. The officer took us to a small room. We sat across from a metal table. He took out forms, a recorder, and began to ask questions. We told him everything from the beginning, from when Clara felt sick and decided to stay home to Robert's visit that morning. The drugs he planted, the phone conversation Clara overheard, the anonymous call to the police, Officer Thomas's visit, Robert's furious return, his confession, everything, every single detail. The officer took notes. His expression changed from skepticism to surprise, and from surprise to indignation. Do you have the recordings? He asked. Clara took out her phone. She showed him the files. The officer listened to them in silence, attentively. When he finished, he sighed. This is serious, very serious. Your son committed several crimes. Possession with intent to distribute, even if they were planted. Conspiracy to commit fraud. False call to the police. Intimidation. Threats. He could face years in prison. I felt a lump in my throat. Years in prison. My son in jail. Part of me wanted to stop everything. Forget what happened. Forgive him. Let him go. But the stronger part of me knew I couldn't. That I had to keep going for Clara, for me, for all the women who have been betrayed by their own children and didn't have the courage to report it. I want to proceed with the complaint, I said. My voice did not tremble. I was determined. The officer nodded. I'm going to call a detective. He will take your official statement. We will also need the location of the drugs. We buried them, Clara said. In the garden under the tomato plants. We can show you exactly where. The officer made a call. Minutes later, an older man in civilian clothes walked in. Detective Barnes, he introduced himself. We told the story again, this time in more detail. The detective asked specific questions. What time exactly did your son enter? Which hand did he use to put the drugs in the coat? How many minutes was he in the house? Can you describe exactly what he said on the phone? We answered everything as best we could. Clara was incredibly precise. She remembered every detail, every word, every gesture. Her photographic memory saved us. The detective was impressed. You are very observant, young lady, he told her. You could be a detective someday. Clara smiled slightly, a flash of pride in the midst of the pain. The detective said he would send a team to recover the drugs, that they would analyze the fingerprints on the baggie, that they would investigate Lisa, that they would look for the anonymous call record, and that they would build a solid case against Robert. But he also warned us, this is going to be difficult for you. Family trials always are. Your son will have the right to defend himself. He will hire lawyers. He will try to turn the situation around. He will say that you are framing him, that the recording is edited, that Clara is lying. You will have to be prepared for that. You will have to be strong. We are ready, I said. We have been strong all our lives. This won't be different. The detective smiled, a sad but understanding smile. I know, ma'am. I see it in your eyes. We left the station 3 hours later. We were exhausted physically and emotionally, but we also felt something like relief. We had taken the first step. We had filed the complaint. Justice was now in motion. We didn't know how long it would take, but at least we had fought. We hadn't stayed silent. We hadn't allowed Robert to get away with it. The silence of the house felt like a fragile piece, but a mother's instinct knew the threat hadn't truly disappeared. We took another taxi back home. During the ride, Clara put her head on my shoulder. I'm proud of you, Grandma. Of your bravery, I hugged her tight. I'm proud of you too, my love. You saved us. If you hadn't been home yesterday, if you hadn't listened, if you hadn't acted, I would be in a cell right now, and you would be in some foster home. Thank you for being brave. We arrived home at noon. The house looked different, brighter, quieter. As if by reporting Robert, we had released something dark that had been living within these walls. I prepared lunch, vegetable soup and homemade bread. We ate in silence, a comfortable silence, the silence of two people who had gone through a storm and survived. After lunch, Clara went to her room to rest. I stayed in the kitchen washing the dishes, looking out the window toward the garden, toward the place where we had buried the drugs. The forensics team would come tomorrow to retrieve them, to analyze them, to confirm our story. The phone rang. My heart stopped. What if it was Robert? What if he had already found out we went to the police? What if he came with more threats? But when I answered, it was Detective Barnes. Mrs. Edith, I have news. What is it, Detective? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. We found Lisa. Her full name is Lisa Moreno. She's your son's girlfriend. They've been living together for the last 6 months. She made the anonymous call from her cell phone. We got the records. We also found messages between her and your son planning everything. I sank onto the kitchen floor with the phone to my ear. Are they going to arrest them? We are arresting both of them right now, he confirmed. We have enough evidence. Your recording, the text messages, the call record, and the drugs we recovered this afternoon from your garden. Your son's fingerprints are on the baggie. It's a solid case. They won't get out of this easily. How long? I asked. My voice was weak, barely a whisper. How long will they be in prison? That will depend on the judge. But with all the charges, conspiracy, financial abuse, they could face between 5 and 10 years each, maybe more if the judge decides it was premeditated, which it clearly was. I hung up the phone. I stayed sitting on the kitchen floor crying. I didn't know if it was from relief or sadness. Maybe both. My son was going to jail. My own son, the baby I had held in my arms, the man I had trusted. He was going to spend years in a cell, and I was responsible. I had reported him. I had handed over the evidence. I had put him there, but I also knew I hadn't had a choice, that I had done the right thing, that protecting Clara was more important than protecting Robert. The following days were strange. The house was calm, but I wasn't. Clara went back to school. I continued with my routine. I made breakfast. I cleaned. I cooked. I watered the plants. Everything the same, everything different, because now, every time I looked at the phone, I expected news. Every time the doorbell rang, my heart raced. I lived in constant anticipation, waiting for the detective to call. waiting for them to tell me what would happen with Robert, waiting for all this to finally end. A week after the arrest, I received a call from Detective Barnes. "Mrs. Edith, I need you to come to the station. There's something you need to know." I went alone. Clara was at school, and I didn't want to worry her more than necessary. The detective met me in his office, which was piled high with folders and papers. "Robert wants to talk to you," he said. "He's detained, awaiting trial. He says he needs to see you, that he needs to explain something." I shook my head immediately. "I don't want to see him. I have nothing to say to him, nor he to me." The detective sighed. "I understand, but there's something else. Lisa is cooperating with us. She's giving information. She says everything was your son's idea, that he manipulated her, that she was just following orders. She's trying to reduce her sentence." "And you believe her?" I asked. "Partially. The messages show that they planned everything together, but it's true that Robert was the one directing. He had the information. He knew your routines. He knew how much the house was worth. Lisa was just his accomplice." I felt something bitter in my mouth. My son hadn't just betrayed me. He had dragged another person into his plan. He had corrupted someone else. "The trial will be in 2 months, the detective continued. "You will have to testify, both you and Clara. You will have to tell everything in front of a judge, in front of Robert, in front of lawyers who will try to discredit your story. They will say you are framing him, that the recording is edited, that Clara is lying. You will have to be prepared for that. You will have to be strong." "I don't know," I said honestly. "But we will do it anyway, because it's the right thing to do." The detective nodded. "I'm going to assign you a social worker, someone who can help Clara process this. She's very young to be carrying so much. There are also support groups for victims of family fraud. It might help you to talk to other people who went through something similar." I left the station feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. 2 months. 2 months until the trial. 2 months of living with this anguish, of waiting, of preparing to face Robert in a courtroom, of having to relive everything again in front of strangers, in front of him. I didn't know if I would have the strength, but I had to find it for Clara, for me, for all the mothers who have been betrayed and need to know that they can survive, that they can move forward, that they can be strong even when everything falls apart. That night, I told Clara about the trial, about what we would have to do. She listened in silence. Then she said, "I can do it, Grandma. I'm going to tell the truth. I'm not afraid of him." "Not anymore," I hugged her. My brave granddaughter. She was only 14 years old, but she had shown more courage than many adults. She had saved me. She had saved both of us, and now we would face whatever came next together. The waiting was the worst part. It felt like a silent storm raging within the walls of our quiet home. The waiting was the worst part. It felt like a silent storm raging within the walls of our quiet home. The 2 months leading up to the trial passed so slowly. Some nights I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake thinking about Robert, about how we got to this terrible point, about all the signs I had ignored over the years. I kept thinking about all the times I justified his behavior, his selfishness, his lies. I always found excuses. He's tired. He's stressed. He just lost his wife. But the truth was that Robert had always been like this. I simply didn't want to see it, because seeing it meant accepting that I had failed as a mother, that the son I raised wasn't who I thought he was. Yet over time, I started to understand something crucial. I hadn't failed. I had done everything I could with what I had. I gave him love, education, values, and opportunities. But in the end, each person chooses who they will be. Robert chose greed. He chose betrayal. He chose money over family. And that wasn't my fault. It was his choice, his responsibility, not mine. The day of the trial arrived. I dressed in my best clothes, a simple gray dress and comfortable black shoes. Clara wore a dark green dress I had bought her for the holidays. We looked presentable, respectable, strong. We took a taxi to the courthouse. It was a huge building, all white columns and cold marble stairs. We sat on a bench outside the courtroom, waiting to be called. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Finally, we were called. We entered the courtroom. It was large, with wooden benches, a high stand for the judge, and tables for the lawyers. And there, at one of the tables, was Robert. I saw him, and something in my chest broke. He looked different, thinner, paler, with deep circles under his eyes. He wore a suit that was too big for him, Our eyes met for a second. I saw something in his eyes. Regret? Shame? I looked away quickly. I couldn't look at him yet. The trial began. The lawyers spoke. They presented the evidence. They showed the recordings, the messages, the forensic tests. Everything was there. Clear, irrefutable. Then I was called to testify. I walked to the stand with trembling legs. I put my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. And I did. I told my story from the beginning, without crying, without hesitation, with a firm voice, because it was the truth. And the truth doesn't need embellishment. Then Clara was called. My granddaughter walked to the stand with her head held high. She answered every question clearly, with courage. She looked her father directly in the eyes as she told how she saw him enter the house, how she heard him conspire, and how she recorded his confession. She didn't tremble. She didn't cry. She was incredible. Robert's lawyer tried to confuse her, to make her doubt, but she didn't give in. She maintained her story, firm, consistent, true. The trial lasted 3 days. 3 days of testimonies, of evidence, of lawyers arguing, of Robert sitting in silence looking at the floor. He never spoke. He never testified in his defense. His lawyer tried to argue that it had been a moment of desperation, that debts had pushed him to do something terrible, that he regretted it deeply. But the evidence was too clear. The messages with Lisa showed weeks of planning, of conspiracy. It wasn't an impulse. It was premeditated, calculated, cold. Lisa did testify. She went to the stand crying, asking for forgiveness, saying that Robert had manipulated her, that she loved him, that she would do anything for him, even something as horrible as this. The prosecutor asked her if she knew I was an old woman, if she knew Clara was just a child, if she knew that what they were doing would destroy a family. She nodded to everything, crying harder, saying she regretted it, that she wished she could turn back time, but she couldn't. The damage was done. The consequences were inevitable. On the 3rd day, the judge delivered his verdict. We all stood up. The judge was an older man with gray hair, a serious expression. He looked at the papers in front of him. Then he looked at Robert. "Mr. Robert Vargas," he said in a grave voice, "you have been found guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud, possession of controlled substances with intent to defraud, intimidation, false call to authorities, and financial abuse against an elderly adult. These are serious crimes, crimes that demonstrate a total lack of moral values, a betrayal of the person who loved you the most, your own mother." The judge paused, and the courtroom was in absolute silence. "I have read your story. I have seen the evidence. I have heard the testimonies. And I must say, it is one of the most disturbing cases I have seen in my 30 years as a judge. You not only tried to rob your mother, you tried to destroy her. You tried to have her arrested for a crime she did not commit. You tried to separate her from her granddaughter. All for money, for a house, for greed? And you did it without remorse, without hesitation, planning it for weeks with your accomplice." Robert still had his head down, motionless. The judge continued, "Therefore, I sentence you to 8 years in prison without possibility of parole during the first 4 years. Additionally, you will have a permanent restraining order against your mother and your daughter. You cannot approach them. You cannot contact them. You will have no rights over your mother's properties. This sentence is effective immediately." He slammed the gavel against the table. The sound echoed throughout the room. Years. My son would spend 8 years in prison. Lisa received 5 years, reduced because she cooperated with the investigation. Both were taken away by the officers. Robert passed in front of me. He stopped for a second. "Mom," he whispered, "I'm sorry." I looked at him for the first time in days. I looked at him directly. There was no forgiveness in my eyes, no love, only exhaustion, only sadness. "Don't talk to me," I said. "Don't ever talk to me again," he nodded. A tear rolled down his cheek. Then the officers took him away, and he disappeared through a door at the back of the room. The silence that followed his departure was heavy, but it was the first true silence of peace we had known in a long time. The silence that followed his departure was heavy, but it was the first true silence of peace we had known in a long time. Maybe it was the last time I would see him. I didn't know, and at that moment, I didn't care. We left the courthouse. The sun was shining outside. It was a beautiful day, blue sky, birds singing, people walking in the streets. Life continued as always. Clara took my hand. "Are you okay, Grandma?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes, my love." I'm okay. We did it, she asked. Yes, we did it. We walked toward the taxi stand. My legs felt heavy, my heart too. But there was something else, something like peace, like liberation, as if a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Detective Barnes caught up with us before we got into the taxi. Mrs. Edith, I want you to know something. You did the right thing. I know it was difficult. I know it hurt, but you protected your granddaughter. You protected yourself. And that takes extraordinary courage. Many people in your situation would have stayed silent out of shame, out of fear. But you fought and you won. That is admirable. I thanked him. He left. We got into the taxi. During the ride home, neither of us said anything. We just held hands, looking out the window, watching the city pass by. When we arrived home, everything looked the same. The same yellow door, the same windows, the same garden. But something had changed. It was no longer the house where Robert had grown up. It was no longer the place of betrayal. Now it was just our home, Clara's and mine, a safe place, a place where we could start over. I walked in and looked around. The living room, the kitchen, the photos on the walls. There were pictures of Robert when he was a child, when he graduated, when he got married. I looked at them for a long time. Then I took them down one by one, not with anger, with sadness, but I took them down. What are you going to do with them? Clara asked. I'm going to store them in a box in the basement. Maybe someday I can look at them without pain. Maybe not, but for now I need them not to be here. I need space to heal. Clara helped me. We packed away all of Robert's photos, all his memories, everything that made us think of him. We took it down to the basement. When we finished, the house felt lighter. More ours. That night, I made dinner. Roasted chicken with vegetables. Clara's favorite dish. We ate at the kitchen table. We talked about simple things. About school, about homework, about a friend of Clara's who had invited her to her birthday party. Normal things, everyday things, and it felt good. It felt like living again. After dinner, Clara helped me wash the dishes. Then we watched a movie together in the living room. A comedy. We laughed. We really laughed for the first time in weeks. When Clara went to sleep, I stayed alone in the living room for a while longer. I turned off the television. I sat in the silence. I thought about everything that had happened. About how a normal morning had turned into a nightmare. About how my granddaughter had saved me. About how we had fought together. About how we had won. It wasn't the victory I would have wanted. It wasn't the ending I would have chosen. But it was justice and it was peace. And for now, that was enough. 6 months passed since the trial. 6 months of rebuilding our lives, of learning to live without fear, without expecting someone to knock on the door with bad intentions, without checking the pockets of my coat every morning, without looking over my shoulder. The house felt like a home again, not a battleground. Clara flourished. Her grades improved. She made new friends. She joined the school drama club. I saw her perform in a play last month. She played a detective who solved a mystery. She was perfect in the role. Natural, confident, brilliant. I also changed. I started going to a support group as Detective Barnes suggested. Other mothers who had been betrayed by their children. Other grandmothers who had had to choose between love and justice. At first, I didn't want to go. I was ashamed to admit what had happened. But when I arrived and heard the stories of the others, I realized I wasn't alone. That the pain I felt was shared. That the guilt I was carrying wasn't mine. A woman named Gloria had lost her house because her son forged her signature. Another named Jasmine had been hit by her son when she refused to give him money. Terrible stories, but also stories of survival, of women who kept going. I learned something important in those months. I learned that a mother's love doesn't mean allowing everything. It doesn't mean sacrificing yourself until you disappear. It doesn't mean accepting abuse because it comes from your own blood. True love also includes boundaries. It includes saying no. It includes protecting yourself and those who depend on you. And sometimes the most difficult love is the one that forces you to let go. To accept that the person you raised chose a path you cannot follow. The spring garden was my canvas for renewal. But a mother's heart is slow to accept true finality. The spring garden was my canvas for renewal, but a mother's heart is slow to accept true finality. One warm spring afternoon, I was in the garden planting new tomato seeds. The previous ones had died during the winter, but it was time to start over. Clara came out of the house with 2 glasses of cold lemonade. She sat next to me on the grass. "Grandma, do you ever think about him?" she asked. "Every day," I admitted. "But it doesn't hurt as much anymore. It doesn't keep me awake at night. It's like a scar. It's still there, but it doesn't bleed anymore." She nodded. "I think about him too. He was my dad. Part of me still misses the dad he was. The one who read me stories before bed, who taught me how to ride a bike. But then I remember what he did, and the affection is mixed with disappointment. It's normal to feel both," I told her. "You can miss the man he was, and at the same time reject the man he became. You don't have to choose just one feeling. Humans are complicated. We can hold contradictory emotions at the same time." We drank our lemonade in silence. The sun warmed our backs. The flowers I had planted last year were blooming. Roses, daisies, sunflowers. Everything was growing. Everything was living. Despite the storm we had been through, despite the pain, life continued. And so did we. I received a letter from Robert 2 weeks ago. It arrived with the cold, official prison seal. I stared at the envelope for an hour before opening it. A part of me wanted to burn it without reading it, but another part needed to know what it said. Finally, I opened it. The letter was short. It said he was sorry, that he had had a lot of time to think, that he realized what he had done. He said he didn't expect forgiveness, but wanted me to know that his regret was real, that he had started therapy in prison, that he was trying to understand why he became what he became, and that maybe someday, many years from now, he could look me in the eyes again without shame. I read the letter twice. Then I put it away in a drawer. I didn't tear it up, but I didn't answer either. I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. And that was okay. Forgiveness is not something that can be forced. It is not something owed out of obligation. It is something that happens when the heart is ready. If it ever is ready. For now, my heart needed to heal. It needed to focus on Clara, on me, on rebuilding what Robert had tried to destroy. One crucial thing I had done was change my will. I went to a different lawyer. I explained the whole situation. We drafted a new document, clear, specific. The house would go to Clara when I died. Robert would have no rights, not even if he got out of prison, not even if he apologized. This decision wasn't out of revenge. It was for protection, to ensure that Clara always had a home, a safe place, a place that no one could take from her. The lawyer assured me that the document was solid, that there was no way to contest it. I felt relieved. One evening, Clara and I were sitting on the sofa. She was doing her math homework. I was reading a book. Suddenly, she closed her notebook. "Grandma, thank you." "For what, my love?" "For believing me, for protecting me, for being brave. Many grandmothers in your situation would have chosen their son. They would have said I was lying, that I was confused. But you believed me from the very beginning, and that meant everything to me." I hugged her. "I will always believe you. I will always protect you. You are the most important thing in my life, my reason for going on." The months continued to pass. Summer arrived. Clara finished the school year with honors. We celebrated with her favorite dessert, chocolate cake with strawberries. I invited some of her friends. The house was filled with laughter, with music, with life. And I realized that we had achieved something incredible. We hadn't just survived. We had healed. We had found joy again despite everything. Despite the betrayal, despite the pain, we were still here. Stronger, more united, wiser. The peace I found was not the absence of memory, but the certainty of a well-fought battle. The peace I found was not the absence of memory, but the certainty of a well-fought battle. One quiet August afternoon, I was sitting alone on the porch. Clara had gone to a friend's house. The sky was painted orange and pink. The sunset was beautiful. I thought about the entire journey from that terrible morning when Clara told me she felt sick. When she unknowingly saved me from a trap that could have destroyed me. I thought about how a 14-year-old girl had more courage than many adults. About how she confronted her own father to protect me. About how her love for me was stronger than her fear. And I thought about myself, about the woman I was and the woman I became. Before all this, I was naive. I trusted blindly, especially my son. I believed that blood was thicker than water, that family love was unbreakable. But I learned that sometimes blood lies, that sometimes family love is one-sided, that trusting is fine but verifying is necessary, that protecting yourself is not selfishness, it's survival, and that saying no to a son who is hurting you doesn't make you a bad mother. It makes you a wise mother. The sun set completely. The stars began to appear one by one like quiet promises in the dark sky, promises that the sun would rise again tomorrow, that life would continue, that pain would eventually turn into a lesson, into strength, into wisdom. I got up from the porch. I went into the house. I turned on the lights. I made tea. I sat in my favorite armchair, and for the first time in many months, I felt complete peace. True peace. The peace that comes from knowing you did the right thing, that you protected what you needed to protect, that you survived what you needed to survive. Clara arrived an hour later. She walked in smiling. She told me about her afternoon, about the jokes with her friend, about the plans for the next school year. I listened to her carefully, with love, with gratitude for having her, for being her grandmother, for sharing this life with her. When she went to sleep, I stayed awake for a little longer. I looked around the house, the yellow walls, the clock marking the moment, the plants in the window, everything in its place, everything at peace. This was my house, my home, and no one would ever take it from us.